Good morning, friends. Nice to share this service together. I'm Swami Jyotish, and this is Swami Devi, and we're light bearers, ministers for Ananda worldwide. Just on Monday was my 57th anniversary of meeting Swami Kriyananda. So I've been around the block a time or two, but I had a unique experience this morning, and maybe you did too. Steve, I've never heard one of the whispers sung. It was beautiful. I really, really enjoyed it. So this lovely topic today about worshiping God in truth and in spirit, and going beneath the outer relatively irrelevant circumstances. One time we were with, Devi and I were, along with a couple of other people, were with Swami in Darjeeling. And we were driving along a street, and we passed through a very poor section. And we saw some children just kind of playing. It had been raining the night before, and they were playing. They were kind of playing in the puddles and the mud. And then about 2 blocks farther, we went past some teachers with a group of students all marching in line, and they were dressed in little uniforms. And I thought to myself, how interesting karma is, to see just in 2 blocks such different circumstances. So I said to Swamiji, I mentioned that, how interesting it was to see those different circumstances, different karma. And I said to him, I have a slightly mathematical or scientific mind. And I said, Swami, I kind of figured it out. And we've incarnated at least 10,000 times. And he said, he kind of looked, and I said, well, it says in the autobiography of a yogi that it takes at least 1 million years of disease-free, harmonious living to achieve spiritual freedom. And so 66 years is an average age, and I did the math on it, Swami, and here's the number. And he turned around and he said, where did you get that tiny number? He said, you have to read it more carefully. If we live harmonious, disease-free lives. So we have lived again and again and again in many different circumstances, many different countries, many different cultures, many different religions. Here we are sitting today in this beautiful temple of Ananda. If we were sitting here 50 years ago, it would be a Catholic church, and the congregation would be Catholic. And we're no better than the Catholics. We're just different. As Swami said, according to our vibration, according to what appeals to us, according to what will allow our hearts to open up, then we're drawn to that particular path. But we aren't any one thing. And so part of this spiritual path is to be essentially spiritual archaeologists. We have to keep digging down from the top layers that are superficial to the layers underneath and the layers underneath that, until we get down to the kind of bedrock of who we are. And that bedrock is not the body, it's not the culture, it's not the language or the proclivities or the tendencies that we have. Swami defined the ego. I love this definition. He said the ego is a bundle of self-definitions. So whatever you, if somebody asks, who are you? And you give them a nice description of your age and culture and job and gender and all of that. You're just kind of pulling out a bundle of self-definitions and handing it to them. And your last life, you would have had a different bundle of self-definitions. And if there is a next life, let's hope that we avoid that. But if there is, I don't want to go through the diaper stage and, if there is, then there'll be a slightly different bundle of self-definitions. Not a radically different, but a slightly different one. So part of the spiritual path is digging down through those, starting with the most superficial levels, which are, the outer circumstances that the whole world loves to fight about and get into wars about because you have a slightly different religion or a slightly different government or what nonsense. We need to dig down and down and down. In fact, there's a certain teacher, Ramana Maharshi, basically his whole path was to continue to ask your question, who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And every answer you come up with, nope, not yet. Keep digging, until you get past all superficial aspects down into your spirit. And so one of the things that we have to look for is not what differentiates us from each other, but what common elements do we have? When a surgeon is doing a surgery, he certainly doesn't ask, is this a Catholic liver or a self-realizationist liver? Because I have to operate differently according to that. You get past the skin and we get much more similar. You get past the organs and we get more similar. You get to the central nervous system. Yogananda said that the true altar that we worship on is our central nervous system. Our central nervous system, everybody in the world is basically the same. And it doesn't matter time or culture or age or gender. We had this beautiful reading on kindness and love. Kindness and love is expressed the same from culture to culture. Maybe slightly different outside, but concern. Do you think, let me ask you this. If your 12-year-old child came up to you and said, I'm going to go by foot to India, would you be a little bit worried? Probably so. You'd get a little bit anxious. You think the Virgin Mary wasn't worried about Jesus when he, at age 12, decided to go from Israel to India? The same anxieties, the same compassion. Now, there are high souls, but they were playing human lives. And so they were demonstrating for us. Kindness is basically a deeper emotion. If you strip away the surface, we are elements of God. We are aspects of God. And God, Spirit, is the same everywhere. And so what we have to do is try to worship God, not in superficial ways, but in spirit. And as we do that, then we're good archaeologists. We start drilling down farther and farther. But part of that process, and it happens everywhere for everyone as they go deeper, is the withdrawal of energy from the outside, because you have to become still. Be still and know that thou art God. And so we have to still our consciousness. Now for us, that process is meditation. And we have actual techniques of meditation that help still and interiorize not just the mind, but the consciousness, the life force. It brings it inside. But for others, they have other techniques. And yet, we will not find who we truly are as long as the mind is restless. It has to go within and become still, because the senses differentiate, and we have to draw the energy away from the senses. The mind differentiates. Now, to a certain extent, the mind, we think the mind creates the world. In fact, the mind condenses the world into something that we can deal with. There's a famous experiment where a bunch of students were asked, the object of what you're doing is to count the number of times these two people pass a basketball back and forth. And so they're carefully passing. Let's say there are 100 students who watched that and counted the number of passes back and forth. And then the experimenter said, "How many of you saw the gorilla?" The gorilla? There was someone in a gorilla suit walking 10 feet behind the people passing the basketball back and forth. Only 1 out of 10 saw the gorilla. And so the mind concentrating, shuts out the world. It doesn't open up the world. We think that, oh, I'm bright, I really see everything. We just limit ourselves. And so part of the process of deep spirituality, of true self-realization, is we have to get beyond the mind. And the mind has to become still until we're deeply internalized. And part of that is we have to awaken the energy and get the energy. Master said that, why do you dream at night? And at night, in a dream, you see whatever you're dreaming as if it were real. And why is it that at night you dream and that world is seemingly real, and yet in the daytime you try to visualize the same scene and it's fuzzy and just barely there? He said the reason is that at night in sleep our energy withdraws automatically, and then it goes up to the brain, and because there's more energy in the brain, actually our brain in this sense is more awake at night than it is during the day. There's more energy in the brain. We're able to see clearly. He said if we can do that during meditation, bring energy to the brain, wake up, then we will be able to not only see what we visualize, but if we have enough energy there, we'll be able to manifest what we visualize. So that awakening process is very important for finding out who we really are and how to really worship. This school, high school, the teachers just got back from taking some of the students, or maybe all of the students in the high school, on a big trip to the Grand Canyon. They went on a 10-hour hike down from the rim down to the bottom and back up. So this joke is for you guys as teachers. So this mother comes in and her child is sleeping. She says, get up, you have to go to school. And the child says, I don't want to go to school, and pulls the covers up over the head. And she says, get up, you have to go to school. And he says, there are 2 reasons I don't want to go to school. All the children, they hate me. And all the teachers, they hate me too. She says, get up, you still have to go to school. There are 2 reasons you have to go to school. You're 50 years old and you're the principal. That's for you especially, Chama. So, we do have to wake up the energy, and we do have to go to school, but the school is different for a spiritual path. And so, as we put our energy calmly and in a focused way, more and more, and get rid of the superficial differences, then we get down. Basically, who we are is God. And God has manifested himself, herself, through us, each one of us in a slightly different way. But the slightly different way is the superficial part. The fact that it's God manifested is the true part. And so that's what we have to get to. And our soul knows that, but because we're stuck thinking that we're the body and the personality and the bundle of self-definitions, which is the ego, because we're stuck thinking that we're egoic, separate from each other, then we can't see that deeper reality. So the whole of the spiritual path, Swami said it to us so clearly. He said, the whole of the spiritual path is just dissolving the ego. And for us, he said, and it extends to us, said, and for us that means longer, deeper meditations and seeing God as the doer in absolutely everything. And so there in a summation is the spiritual path for us. Dissolve the ego, meditate longer and deeper, and see God as doing everything that happens through you. And when we get to that kind of a level, then everything, everyone, every person, every object, every atom is the same. Superficial differences, yes, because otherwise we wouldn't have this drama going on. But in reality, the reality is that the veriest atom is made of God's stuff, and you and I are made of God's stuff. And it's that altar that we have to find and that we have to worship. And if we can do that, then we will have achieved the summation, the purpose for all of those more than 10,000 lifetimes that we have been living. And someday we're going to have descending upon us the consciousness of who we truly and really are. And as long as we keep searching for it, in fact, the search itself isn't the essence. It's the desire that has us search. It's the desire to know the truth or know universal love or know God, however the mind wants to interpret that. That desire for unity, which resides in the heart and soul of every living being. That's the essence. And so the search is really trying to feed the essence as differentiated from the superficial nature. So we're all the same. We're all on the same path together. And let's rejoice in that fact. And let's, as we go through this incarnation, try to get rid of the discriminating sense that tries to separate us from others, because it's all God and God's stuff playing the game. God bless you.
Good morning, everyone. Because we don't come here very often, we both speak. I'll speak briefly also. We've had a wonderful weekend. Some of you are just joining us today for our Sunday service, but most of you have been with us for the whole weekend. And it's really, I want to thank each of you for creating a beautiful spiritual environment and a sense of family and joy and togetherness. It's just been marvelous. There's been a number of different topics that we've touched on during these days since Thursday evening. But it was so beautiful to end with this topic about what's the best way to worship. We started off talking about building community from the inside out. And then Friday night we talked about how to be a channel for higher consciousness. And then last night we had a beautiful evening and talking in part about creating beacons of light, supporting the light in the world. But it all ends with this final concept of silence, going within. We can, all these things we've talked about, building communities and channeling creativity and supporting beautiful temples, none of it would exist without awareness of inner silence. A friend of ours was visiting a Catholic monastery in Italy, and there was a plaque on the wall attributed to St. Francis, a quote, but it may not have been actually historically accurate, but the quote said, "Preach the gospel at all times, use words when necessary." And in other words, whether it's the gospel or the Vedas or the Quran or the Torah, to live it at all times so that people feel there is a deeper reality in this world beyond just the getting and spending and everything that we do. But this ability to enter into a state of silence, it's not easy. This world is a busy world. Many of us have families. Many of us have demanding jobs. How do we find time to meditate? How do we do all of this? And how do we respond to the outward demands in our life and still have an inner life? And that's really the mission of our masters in a nutshell. They came, this great line of gurus, they came at this time knowing that it would be a very difficult time to have an inner life. That's when most of you probably have read Autobiography of a Yogi, when Babaji calls Lahiri Mahashaya, initiates him in a cave in the Himalayas and into Kriya Yoga. And he said, now you can give Kriya Yoga only to those who are willing to renounce the world. And Lahiri said, please, Master, let me address the needs of suffering humanity, of everyday people who can't renounce the world. Their karma and their dharma is not as such, but they desperately need to find that inner reality within them. And Babaji said to Lahiri, God has spoken through you. Be it so. And that's why we're all here. Because Lahiri asked Babaji if we could be given a technique in the midst of our daily life and all the demands and all the diversions and things that draw our mind out, if we could find a way to still enter into the inner silence. And nothing is really accomplished. We can't do it without that. Master said to Swami Kriyananda, who is our teacher and Ananda's founder, he said, your life will be one of intense activity and meditation. And this is true of all of us, intense activity, but meditation. And Swami was a wonderful model of that. In thinking of being in inner silence, I remember some years ago, Swami was invited to Paris to give a talk. And at the time, a group of us were living in northern Italy, helping to establish Ananda's work in Italy and by extension in Europe. And so Naya Swami Dhyana and I went up to Paris to join Swami to give him support for the program he was going to give. And we had a few days to visit Paris, and so Swami said, let's go pray in Notre Dame Cathedral. So we went there, but it was Easter weekend, and it was crowded with people, and there were kids running all over and climbing over the chairs and the pews and shouting, and the parents were trying to tell them to be quiet. It was like a circus. And Swami just went deep within, and you could tell he was meditating so deeply. And Dhyan and I can't say we matched him in any way. We were very distracted by all that was going on. So we walked out, and Swami started speaking. The three of us were on the sidewalk, and Swami started to say, Didn't you have a beautiful, and Diana knew where it was going, so she raced ahead so she wouldn't have to answer him. And I was like, didn't you have a beautiful meditation? And I said, Swami, I'm sorry to admit it was too distracting. It was too noisy, too much restless energy. And he was harsh with me. He said, you have to rise above that. And it was a good lesson, because life isn't going to adapt to what you want. There will be noise, there will be distraction, there will be people calling you. How many times have you been trying to meditate and the phone rings? And you look and you realize you've got to get that phone call. And it's always the challenge. But if we can realize every day, try even momentarily to touch that inner silence. And in our life, we have known heroes, people whose lives were beyond what anything we could imagine. We have a friend, his name is Joe Hunt. We gave him the spiritual name Jai Ram. He's been in prison for 30 years now for a crime of which he is totally innocent. And everything we've tried to do to get him released, the legal system just has clamped down. And his mother, like this was 25 years ago, sent him a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi. And then he reached out to Ananda. Can you help me learn how to meditate? And many of our ministers went. Finally, Jyotish went and gave him Kriya Yoga in this little broom closet in Folsom maximum security prison. And ever since that day, in spite of lockdowns and gang warfare and pandemics in these prisons, Jai Ram has practiced Kriya Yoga morning and evening in his prison cell, on his bunk. And if he can do it, what's wrong with us? We have temples to go to. We have meditation rooms in our homes. But if you realize that it's the motivation, it's not the circumstances. The circumstances will never be perfect. But we have to say that inner silence is the only reality, and everything I want in life, love, friendship, family, success, happiness, comes from the inner silence. It doesn't come from the outer things. And once when we went to visit Jai Ram, he'd been moved to many different prisons, but this was in that maximum security. And we went into the waiting room, and there were heavy-duty people there, prisoners. I mean, you can tell, they committed every crime you could imagine, and it was scary. But then Jai Ram walked in the room. He was like a prince of light, same uniform, same everything else, but he just carried his light with him. And so, one way or another, our karma creates a prison for all of us. We're trapped in the ego. But the trick is to find the inner silence, to live in that silence, and wherever we go, to touch people's lives with that silence. And just as we said, preach the word of God at all times. Use words when necessary. We had another friend who was a nurse in an emergency room in San Francisco in a hospital. And every day at lunchtime, she just would go out to her car in the parking lot and do Kriya, and then come back and be an emergency room nurse. And all her other colleagues said, why are you always so calm? No matter what comes in this emergency room, you just never get ruffled. And she just said, I have my ways. She didn't explain because they weren't ready. But when we live in that inner silence, nothing can throw us off. Nothing can disturb us, because we realize the only reality is the presence of God's peace and His love within us. And everything else is just a test. It's just a distraction. So it's a wonderful way to end our time together, just to say, let's all go deep in our lives. Each one of us, we could take a poll right now, or a survey, whose life is perfectly easy, and there wouldn't be one person who could check off that box. But every single one of us, if we would say, who has the potential to find inner peace within, we all could check off that box. And so let's remember that, and let's do our best to find the peace within, to find the kindness within, and live it in such a way that people who we may never know their name, we may pass them on the street, but just in that moment, their consciousness is uplifted. So there's a wonderful affirmation of Master, and I'll just close with this. I go forth in perfect peace, perfect faith in the power of omnipresent good. Let's have that perfect faith in the power of omnipresent good. Live it, awaken it, never lose it, no matter what comes your way. God bless you.
Lord's my shepherd, I not want. He makes me down to lie in pastures green. He leadeth me the quiet waters by. He leadeth me, he leadeth me the quiet waters by. My soul he doth restore again, and me to walk doth make. Within the paths of blessedness, e'en for his own name's sake. Within the paths of blessedness, e'en for his own name's sake. Yea, though I pass through shadow vale, yet will I fear no ill. For thou art with me, and thy rod and staff me comfort still. Thy rod and staff me comfort still, me comfort still. My table thou hast furnished in presence of my foes. My head with oil thou dost anoint, and my cup overflows. My head thou dost with oil anoint, and my cup overflows. Goodness and mercy all my days will surely follow me, and in my Father's heart always my dwelling place shall be, and in my heart forevermore thy dwelling place shall be. Lived in many countries and mixed with many men. I've shared their days of sunshine, gone with them in the rain. The fires at evening said we were brothers. The fires at evening said we were brothers. A soldier I saw weeping beside a dying